Hello there, welcome back to Forum Focus. I'm Wyatt Sharp. It's good to have you with us. Australia made international headlines by moving toward one of the most aggressive social media regulations in the democratic world, a proposal to restrict or ban social media access for children under the age of 16, framed as a response to rising concerns about mental health, online harm, and platform accountability. The policy immediately placed Australia at the center of a global conversation. Supporters call it a long overdue intervention. Critics warn it could set a precedent for overreach. Either way, this decision marked by a turning point in how governments approach the power of big tech. And joining me now to talk about it all is Leonardo Puglisi. He is a teen journalist in Australia. Leo, good to have you with us.
Great to be here.
Let's just perhaps start out because one thing that I think is true for both of us is that we wouldn't have been able to share our content and our interviews at a young age with people if not for the power of social media. And albeit, and I'm sure you'd be willing to concede this as well, that a lot of our peers and a lot of our friends in school and such probably are not using social media for the same reasons. But that said, it takes away kind of that liberty and that opportunity to go about, using these platforms for some of these more innovative reasons. Is that perhaps a concern that you have with this ban as well?
Yeah, definitely. And as you say, right, the the majority of young people on social media are not running their own news channel or being journalists or whatever. But it is ultimately one of many concerns I have with this ban. I guess broadly outside of maybe our specific industry, just the fact that young people aren't able to explore their passions, explore their talents, and
Right.
in areas that should be really safe for them. And look, we know that there is harm on social media, but in my view, the ban doesn't really address that. It doesn't remove this harmful content. So really, there should be ways for young people to explore it. But absolutely, Six News wouldn't have existed in the first place had we not had social media.
Is there a question too? Because one thing that I keep on talking about, and that when people in Canada have been asking me, is this something that we should do in Canada? My response has always been maybe it's better to just regulate the algorithm so that young people aren't being shown toxic content after toxic content and still allow them the liberty to go on these platforms and search for what they want to search for, but just kind of ending that endless loop of content that's being shown to them. Is that a fair kind of critique or criticism? Maybe it's better to, yes, regulate the platform, but not take it away entirely.
Yeah, definitely. I would have preferred more regulations. I know the government here has tools at its disposal, like the Safety Commissioner, that can do content takedowns, for instance, if it's graphic content, if it's particularly offensive, that they have the ability to do that. There are other talks, and this is less of a thing that the government can do, but things like Instagram for teens,
Right.
ways that can be safer because we talk about YouTube Kids, but obviously that's not the demographic that's really being banned here. That's not what 15-year-olds are watching.
Mhm.
And ultimately, I think they should have a place that is safer for them, but still able to have some kind of access to social media. And absolutely, I think regulation would have been better. We know that algorithms can lead to those rabbit holes. That's very well known. But also, there is some concern that if you're only watching YouTube in a logged out state, which teenagers are able to do, that can expose you to content that you would never see otherwise because
Yeah.
YouTube does recommend stuff that is at least somewhat linked to what you may be looking up. Whereas, what it's recommending for someone who's logged out could be absolutely anything really, and could be even more random and certainly less regulated, less monitored.
And I mean, I must concede, like, I do see the perspective of the government looking at some of my peers. I mean, like, if I were to go on my screen time on my phone, it would be really high as well. But compared to some of my peers, probably not nowhere near as high. And I wonder if it's a question of just the government obviously thinking, and this is likely what the kind of explanation that they've given is just they want to, better the mental health of young people. And they think that social media is a root cause of that. But one of my criticisms of that would be that a lot of people, with respect to how they use social media, they oftentimes, young people would say that it's actually giving them like a boost in some ways, which perhaps isn't a good thing if you become over reliant on it. But I almost, and I don't want to say it is non existent, but the argument that you hear from government officials is that social media lowers the self esteem of young people. And I would actually question that. And I would just kind of wonder what your perspective would be on that.
Yeah, look, I think on the mental health question that there is obviously undoubtedly, impact that social media has negatively, and that should be addressed. But also we have to remember that there are, vulnerable young people who use social media for really important reasons. Maybe they're from a marginalized background, remote area, don't feel safe at home or school, but they found a safe space online and that, helps them and that gets taken away from them. I think that's been a real concern. And again, these impacts are on there, but we have to remember, it's not across the board, which is a kind of a big problem with having a blanket ban in the first place.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. Leonardo Puglisi will come back with us after this. Stay with us.